The Shiva Purana, Chapter 1. The Greatness of Shiva Purana. Sanaka said, O Sutta of great intellect, O my lord, the knower of all philosophical principles, please narrate to me the essence of the Puranas in detail. How do good conduct, good devotion, and power of discrimination flourish? How are base feelings dispelled by good men? In this terrible Kali age, all living beings have almost become demoniac in character. What is the effective mode of remedying the same? Now tell me about the greatest means to achieve the most perfect weal, the holiest of the holy modes. What is that? The practice of which particularly purifies the soul. What is that which enables a man of unsullied mind to attain Shiva? Sutta said, O foremost amongst sages, you are blessed indeed as you are desirous of hearing. Hence I shall ponder over the greatest of the sacred lore intelligently and tell you. Oh dear, listen to that divine panacea evolved out of all religious tenets, heightening true devotion and conducive to the pleasure of Shiva. It is destructive of the great fear of the python of Kala. O sage, it is the noble Shiva Purana, formerly narrated by Shiva himself. For the benefit of the people in the age of Kali, the sage Vyasa has abridged it out of great respect for the sage Sanat Kumara on being instructed by him. O sage, there is nothing other than Shiva Purana for the purification of the mind, especially of the people of the Kali age. It is only the intelligent and the highly fortunate man who has accumulated great merits in his previous birth who will be drawn towards it. This Shiva Purana is the greatest and the noblest of the sacred lore. It is the form of Shiva and as much as to be served and realized in this world. By reading this and listening to it, the good man becomes very pious. By all means, he instantly attains Shiva's region. Hence, every endeavor of men to read this is desirable. Loving care to listen to it yields all desired results. By listening to this Purana of Shiva, a man becomes sinless. After enjoying all extensive worldly pleasures, he will attain the region of Shiva. Merely by listening to the story of Shiva, a man secures that merit which results from the performance of Rajasuya and 100 agnostomas. O sage, those who listen to Shiva Purana, the noblest of sacred lore, cease to be mere human beings. They must be undoubtedly considered as manifestations of Rudra, a form of Shiva. Sages consider the dust in the feet of those who habitually listen to that Purana and recite it, on a par with holy sinners. May those who wish to attain the seat of salvation listen always to the holy Shiva Purana with great devotion. O noblest among sages, if he is unable to listen to it always, let him hear it for a short while every day with his mind fully controlled. If anyone is unable to listen to it every day, O sage, let him listen to Shiva Purana in the holy months. Those who listen to that Purana, even for a muhurta, or 48 minutes, half that period, or 1/4 of that period, or even for a moment, will not suffer from mishaps. O Lord of sages, the man who listens to that Purana crosses the ocean of worldly existence after burning the great forest of karma, or the binding actions. O sage, the merit that accrues from all gifts and all sacrifices becomes stabilized after listening to Shiva Purana. Particularly in the age of Kali, there is no greater virtue conducive to the achievement of liberation by men, O sage, than listening to Shiva Purana. There is no doubt in this that listening to the Purana and reciting the names of Shiva is as efficacious as the kalpa tree in yielding one's desires. For the benefit of the evil-minded persons of the Kali age, bereft of virtuous conduct, Lord Shiva has produced the nectar in the form of Shiva Purana. A single man, the man who drinks nectar, becomes immortal and unaging. But the nectar of the divine story of Shiva, if drunk, makes the whole family immortal and unaging. The sanctifying story of Shiva Purana must always be resorted to, definitely so. Merely by listening to Shiva Purana, if such good results, what am I to say about the result when Shiva abides in the heart? This work consists of 24,000 verses divided into 7 samhitas, or compendiums. The 3 kinds of devotion, 1. By meditation, 2. Recital of prayer, and 3. Acts of worship and service are fully explained in it. It must be listened to with great respect. The first compendium is called Vidyasvara Samhita. The second is Rudra Samhita. The third is Sata Rudra. And the fourth is Koti Rudra. The fifth compendium is called Uma Samhita, the sixth is Kailasa Samhita, and the seventh is Vayavaya. Thus there are 7 samhitas in the Purana. This divine Purana of 7 samhitas is called after Shiva. It stands on an equal footing with Brahman in the Vedic texts, and accords an achievement that is superior to everything else. He who reads the entire Shiva Purana without omitting any of the 7 samhitas can be called a Jivan Mukta, a living liberated soul. O sage, the ignorant man is tossed about in the ocean of worldly existence till the excellent Shiva Purana reaches his ears. Of what avail is listening to many sacred texts and other confounding Puranas? The Shiva Purana alone loudly proclaims its readiness to grant salvation. The house where the discourse on the Shiva Purana is held becomes a holy center. It destroys all sins of the inmates of the house. Thousands of horse sacrifices and hundreds of Vajapaya sacrifices do not merit even the 16th part of the Shiva Purana. O best of sages, a sinner is called a sinner till the moment he hears Shiva Purana with great devotion. The holy rivers Ganga and others, the 7 sacred cities of Gaya, can never be equal to Shiva Purana. If one wishes for the greatest of goals, liberation, one shall recite at least a stanza or even half of it from Shiva Purana. He who constantly listens to Shiva Purana, fully comprehending its meaning, or simply reads it with devotion, is undoubtedly a meritorious soul. Lord Mahasana, Shiva, is extremely pleased with the sensible man who listens to Shiva Purana when death is imminent. Lord Shiva accords him a seat in his own region. He who adores this Shiva Purana with great devotion enjoys in the world all desired objects and attains Shiva Loka. Never slack in his devotion to Shiva Purana. He who keeps this work well wrapped in a silk cloth will ever be happy. The holy Shiva Purana, the sole possession of a devotee of Shiva, should assiduously be resorted to by a person who desires for happiness here and hereafter. The holy Shiva Purana that accords the four aims of life, virtue, wealth, love, and salvation, must be heard and read with great devotion always. The Shiva Purana, the greatest harbinger of the perfect welfare among the Vedas, Itihasas, and other sacred texts, must be thoroughly understood by those who seek salvation. This Shiva Purana is the greatest resort of the knowers of Atman, spiritual seekers forever. It is the noblest object worthy of adoration of good men. It suppresses the three types of distresses: physical illness, extraneous attacks, and divine calamities. It accords happiness always, and it is very pleasing to all devas, led by Brahma, Hari, and Isa. With the mind extremely delighted, I bow unto Shiva Purana forever. May Shiva be pleased and bestow on me a devotion to his feet. Shiva Purana, Chapter 2, The Liberation of Devaraja. Sanaka said, O Sutta, thou art the most blessed and the most fortunate knower of the greatest truth. Thou hast narrated to us, out of great compassion, this divine, wonderful tale. This wonderful narrative that destroys hosts of sins, purifies the mind, and propitiates Lord Shiva, has been heard by us. Thanks to thy compassion, we have decisively realized that there is nothing so fine and nice as this tale. Who are those among sinners in the Kali age who get sanctified by this story? Please enlighten us. Make the whole world gratified. Sutta said, Men who habitually commit sins, wicked persons indulging in vicious activities, and persons of lecherous disposition become pure hereby. This is a great Nanya Yajna, or sacrificial rite of wisdom. It yields worldly enjoyment as well as salvation. It dispels all sins and delights Shiva. Men overwhelmed by their thirst of covetousness, those devoid of truthfulness, those who decry even their parents, haughty, vain fellows, and persons prone to violent activities become sanctified by this. Those who never practice the duties of their varnas and ashramas, castes and walks of life, and those of malicious temperament become sanctified thanks to the Nanyajna, even in the Kali age. Those who habitually practice deception and those who are ruthless and of cruel disposition are sanctified by this Nanyayajna, even in the Kali age. Those who misappropriate the wealth of Brahmins and thereby nourish themselves, and those who indulge in heinous crimes of adultery, become sanctified by this Nanayajna, even in the Kali age. Those who always indulge in sinful actions and those who are roguish persons of wicked mind become sanctified by this Nanayajna, even in the Kali age. Men of unclean habits and wicked minds, men who know no peace, and men who swallow temple and trust properties become sanctified by this Nanayajna, even in the Kali age. The merit accruing from this Purana destroys great sins, yields worldly enjoyments and salvation, and delights Lord Shiva. In this context, an ancient anecdote is cited as an example, the mere hearing of which removes all sins utterly. In the city of Kiratas, there lived a Brahmin, extremely poor and deficient in Brahmaniacal knowledge. He used to sell various kinds of beverage and was averse to the worship of gods or to virtuous activities. He never practiced the daily sandhya prayers or ablutions. His practice resembled a Vaishya's mode of living. He never hesitated to deceive credulous persons. His name was Devaraja. Either by killing or by using various deceitful means, he used to rob Brahmins, Satriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, and others. Thus, by foul means, much wealth was later accumulated by him, but the sinner that he was, not even the slightest part of his wealth was utilized in virtuous acts. Once that Brahmin went to a lake to take his bath. There he saw a harlot called Subhavati, and was much agitated at her sight. The beautiful woman was extremely delighted on coming to know that a rich Brahmin had become her willing slave. The Brahmin's heart was filled with love due to her pleasant talk. He decided to make her his wife, and she consented to have him as her husband. Thus, in mutual love, they sported for a long time. Sitting, lying, eating, drinking, and playing together, they were not at all different from any other wedded couple. Dissuaded again and again by his mother, father, first wife, and others, though he was, he never paid heed to their words, but continued his sinful activities. Once he became so enraged as to kill his mother, father, and a wedded wife at dead of night while they were asleep, and took possession of their wealth. Enamored of the courtesan, he handed over to her his own wealth, and also the wealth that he looted from his father, mother, and first wife. In the company of this harlot, he used to eat all sorts of forbidden food, became an addict to wine and spirituous liquors, and partook of his food from the same plate as his concubine. Once, by chance, he came to the city of Pritasthana. He saw a Shiva temple where saintly men had congregated. During his stay there, he was afflicted by an acute fever. He heard the discourse on Shiva conducted by a Brahmin. The Brahmin, Devaraja, suffering from fever, died at the end of a month. He was bound with nooses by Yama's attendants and forcibly taken to Yama's city. In the meanwhile, Shiva's attendants, dressed in white, smeared with ashes all over the body, wearing garlands of rudraksha and wielding tridents in their hands, started furiously from Shivaloka and reached Yama's city. They threatened the attendants of Yama, the god of death, and thrashed them. Releasing Devaraja from their clutches, they seated him in a wonderful aerial chariot. When they were about to start to Kailasa, a great tumult arose in the middle of Yama's city, on hearing which Dharmaraja, the god of death, himself came out of his palace. On seeing the four messengers, who appeared like replicas of Rudra himself, Dharmaraja, the knower of virtues, honored them in accordance with the custom. Yama came to know of everything through his vision of wisdom. Out of fear, he did not question the noble attendants of Shiva. being duly honored and adored by Yama. They went to Kailasa and handed over the Brahman to Shiva, the very ocean of mercy, and to the Divine Mother Parvati. Blessed indeed is the story of Shiva Purana, the holiest of holy stories, a mere hearing of which qualifies even the greatest sinner for salvation. The great seat of Sada Shiva is the greatest abode and the noblest of positions which Vedic scholars have exalted and stationed above all lokas. Devaraja, the base Brahmin, addicted to wine, enamored of a vile harlot, slayer of his own father, mother, and wife, and who out of the greed for money had killed many Brahmins, Satriyas, Vaisyas, and Sudras, and others, became a liberated soul instantaneously on reaching that supreme loka. Shiva Purana, Chapter 3, Kankula's Dissolution and Detachment. Sanaka said, O Sutta of great intellect, thou art extremely blessed and omniscient. By thy favor I am gratified to satiety, again and again. My mind rejoices much on hearing this old anecdote. Please narrate another story equally increasing devotion to Shiva. Nowhere in the world are those who drink nectar honored with liberation, but in the regard of the nectar of the story of Shiva, it is different. When drunk, it straightway accords salvation. Thou art blessed, blessed indeed. Blessed, blessed is the story of Shiva, on hearing which a man attained Shiva Loka. Sutta said, O Sanaka, please listen, I shall tell you, though it is a great secret, since you are the foremost among Vedic scholars and a leading devotee of Shiva. There is a seaside village, Baskala, where sinful people, bereft of Vedic virtue, reside. There are wicked debauchees, with deceptive means of livelihood, atheist farmers bearing weapons and adulterous rogues. They know not anything about true knowledge, detachment, or true virtue. They are brutish in their mental makeup and take a great deal of interest in listening to evil gossips and slander. People of different castes are equally roguish, never paying attention to their own duties. Always drawn to worldly pleasures, they are ever engrossed in one evil action or another. All the women, too, are equally crooked, whorish, and sinful. Evil-tempered, loose in morals, they are devoid of good behavior and disciplined life. In the village, Baskala, peopled by wicked people, there was a base Brahmin called Benduga. He was a wicked sinner, traversing evil paths. Although he had a beautiful wife, he was enamored of a prostitute. His passion for her completely upset his mind. He forsook his devoted wife Kankula and indulged in sexual dalliance with the prostitute, overwhelmed by Cupid's arrows. Many years thus elapsed, without any abatement in his evil action. Afraid of violating her chastity, Kankula, though smitten by Cupid, bore her distress, calmly for a short while. But later on, as her youthful health and boisterous virility increased, Cupid's onslaught became extremely unbearable for her, and she ceased from strictly adhering to her virtuous conduct. Unknown to her husband, she began to indulge in sexual intercourse with her sinful paramour at night. Fallen thus from sattvic virtues, she went ahead along with her evil ways. O sage, once he saw his wife amorously indulging in sexual intercourse with her paramour at night. Seeing his wife thus defiled by the paramour at night, he furiously rushed at them. When the roguish, deceitful paramour knew that the wicked Benduga had returned to the house, he fled from the scene immediately. The wicked Benduga caught hold of his wife, with threats and abuses, fisted her again and again. The whorish, wicked woman Kankula, thus beaten by her husband, became infuriated and spoke to her wicked husband. Kankula said, "Foul-minded that you are, you indulge in sexual intercourse with the harlot every day. You have discarded me, your wife, ever ready to serve you with my youthful body. I am a youthful maiden, endowed with beauty and mentally agitated by lust. Tell me, what other course can I take when I am denied the amorous sport with my husband? I am very beautiful and agitated with flush of fresh youth. Deprived of sexual intercourse with you, I am extremely distressed. How can I bear the pangs of passion?" Sutta said, "That base Brahmin, Benduga, when addressed thus by his wife, foolish and averse to his own duties, said to her." Benduga said, "True indeed is what you have said with your mind agitated by passion. Please listen, my dear wife. I shall tell you something that will be of benefit to you. You need not be afraid. You go ahead with your sexual sports with any number of paramours. No fear need enter your mind. Extract as much of wealth as you can from them and give them enough sexual pleasure. You must hand over all of the amount to me. You know that I am enamored of my concubine. Thus our mutual interests will be assured." Sutta said. His wife Kankula, on hearing these words of her husband, became extremely delighted and assented to his vicious proposal. Having thus entered into the nefarious mutual contract, the two wicked persons, the husband and the wife, fearlessly went ahead with their evil actions. A great deal of time was thus wasted by the foolish couple indulging in their vicious activities. The wicked Benduga, the Brahmin, with a Sudra woman for his concubine, died after some years and fell into hell. The foolish fellow endured distress and torture in hell for many days. He then became a ghost in the Vindhya mountain range, continuing to be terribly sinful. After the death of her husband, the wicked Benduga, the woman Kankula, continued to stay in her house with her sons. The woman foolishly continued her amorous dalliance with her paramours, till she no longer retained her youthful charms. Due to divine intercession, it chanced that on an auspicious occasion she happened to go to the Gokarna temple in the company of her kinsman. Casually moving about here and there with her kinsman, she happened to take her bath in a holy pond as a normal routine affair. In a certain temple, a scholar of divine wisdom was conducting a discourse on the holy Siva Purana story, some which she happened to hear. The portion that fell on her ears was the context in which it was said that the servants of Yama would introduce a red-hot iron into the vaginal passage of a woman who indulges in sexual intercourse with their paramours. This narrative, made by the Puranica to increase detachment, made the woman tremble with fear. At the end of the discourse, when all the people dispersed, the terrified woman approached the scholarly Brahmin and spoke to him in confidence. Kankula said, "O noble sir, please listen to the ignoble activities which I performed without knowing my real duties. O Lord, on hearing the same, you will please take pity on me and lift me up. O Lord, with a mind utterly deluded, I have committed very great sin. Blinded by lust, I spent the whole of my youth in incontinent prostitution. Today, on hearing your learned discourse, abounding in the sentiments of non-attachment, I have become extremely terrified, and I tremble much. Fie upon me, the foolish sinner of a woman, deluded by lust, censurable, clinging to worldly pleasures, and averse to my own duties. Unknowingly, a great sin that produces excessive distress has been committed by me for a fleeting glimpse of an evanescent pleasure, a criminal action. Alas, I do not know which terrible goal this will lead me to. My mind has always been turned to evil ways. Which wise man will come to my succor here? At the time of death, how shall I face the terrible messengers of Yama? How shall I feel when they tie nooses forcibly round my neck? How shall I endure in hell the mincing of my body to pieces? How shall I endure the special torture that is excessively painful? I bewail my lot. How can I peacefully proceed with the activity of my sense organs during the day? Agitated with misery, how shall I get peaceful sleep during the night? Alas, I am undone. I am burnt down. My heart is torn to pieces. I am doomed in every respect. I am a sinner of all sorts. O adverse fate! It was you who directed my mind along evil lines. With a hateful stubbornness, you made me commit great sins. I was led astray from the path of my duty that would have bestowed all happiness. O Brahman, my present pain is millions of times more than that of a man stuck to the stake or hurled from a high mountain top. My sin is so great that it cannot be washed away, even if I take ablutions in the Ganga for 100 years, or even if I perform 100 sacrifices. What shall I do? Where shall I go? Who shall I resort to? I am falling into the ocean of hell. Who can save me in this world? O noble sir, thou art my preceptor. Thou art my mother, thou art my father, I seek refuge in thee. I am in a pitiable plight, lift me, lift me. Sutta said. The intelligent Brahmin mercifully lifted up Kankula, who had become disgusted with worldly affairs and had fallen at his feet. That Brahmin then spoke as follows. Shiva Purana, Chapter 4, Kankula's Salvation. The Brahmin said, O Brahmin lady, fortunately you have realized at the proper time on hearing the story of Shiva Purana that is conducive to non-attachment. Do not be afraid, seek refuge in Shiva. All sins perish instantaneously by Shiva's grace. I shall explain to you the great object attached to glorification of Shiva, whereby your course hereafter will be pleasant always. It is by listening to the excellent story that your mind has now turned to the pure path of repentance and detachment towards worldly pleasures. Repentance is the only way of acquittal for all sinners. Saintly men have extolled it as the only way of expiation of all sins. Purity can be realized by repentance alone. If the sinner expiates in the manner advised by saintly men, it removes all sins. After due expiation, he becomes free from fear. By repentance, he attains salvation, undoubtedly. The mental purity that one derives on hearing the story of Siva Purana cannot be gained by any other means. As a mirror becomes free from dirt on being wiped with a cloth, so is the mind undoubtedly purified by listening to this story. Accompanied by Amba, Shiva stays in the minds of pure men. The sanctified soul thereupon attains the region of Shiva and Amba. Hence the story is the means of realizing the fourfold aims of life. It is for this Mahadeva earnestly created this. Listening to the story of Parvati's consort Shiva brings about steady contemplation. Contemplation leads to perfect knowledge, which certainly brings in salvation. A person who listens to the story in this birth, though he be unable to meditate, realizes the same in the next birth, after which he reaches the goal of Shiva. Many repentant sinners have meditated upon Shiva after hearing this story and have achieved salvation. Listening to the excellent story in the cause of beatitude for all men, properly entertained, it dispels the ailment of worldly bondage. Listening to the story of Shiva, constant meditations thereon, and repeated musings certainly purify the mind. That, the purity of the mind, leads the meditator to a devotion of Mahesha and his two sons Ganesha and Kartikeya. With their blessings, one undoubtedly attains liberation. A person devoid of that devotion with his mind, entangled in the bondage of ignorance, is a brute. He can never be liberated from the worldly bondage. Hence, O Brahmin lady, you turn away from worldly pleasures. Listen to the sanctifying story of Shiva with devotion. Your mind, as you listen to the excellent story of Shiva, the Supreme Soul, will become pure, and thereafter you will realize liberation. Liberation is assured in this very birth to a person who meditates on the lotus-like feet of Shiva with a pure mind. Truth. I am saying the truth, Sutta said. After saying this, that excellent Brahmin, with his mind melting with pity, ceased talking and turned his attention to the meditation on Shiva with the purity of the soul. The wife of Binduga, called Kankula, when thus addressed by the Brahmin, became delighted with her eyes brimmed with tears. With great delight in her heart, she fell at the Brahmin's feet. Kankula, with her palms joined together, said, I am blessed. Afterward, she rose up with great mental agitation, with her hands joined together, her words faltering with excitement. The woman of good intellect, in her detached mood, said to the Brahmin, the great devotee of Shiva. Kankula said, O my lord, great Brahmin, devotee of Shiva, you are blessed. You are endowed with the vision of truth. You are devoted to rendering help to others. You are to be described among great saintly men. O saintly one, I am about to fall into the ocean of hell. Save me. I am now faithfully eager to listen to the Purana. On hearing its excellent story, I became detached from worldly pleasures. Sutta said, So saying with reverence, she got the blessing of the Brahmin. Desirous of hearing the Purana, she stayed there rendering service to him. The intelligent Brahmin devotee narrated the Puranic story to the woman on the spot. In this manner, she listened to the excellent story of Shiva Purana in that holy center from that excellent Brahmin. On hearing that excellent story, that heightened devotion, knowledge, and detachment, and yielded liberation, she became greatly blessed. Favored by the good preceptor, she quickly gained purity of mind. By the blessings of Shiva, she could meditate on Shiva's forms and features. Thus, resorting to the good preceptor, her mind was drawn toward Shiva. She constantly meditated on the sentient, blissful body of Shiva. She wore barks of trees and had her hair matted. She smeared ashes over her body. She wore garlands of rudraksha beads. Every day she took her ablutions in the sacred water. She regularly repeated Shiva's names. She regulated her speech and diet. She propitiated Lord Shiva in the manner advised by the preceptor. O Sanaka! Thus for a long time Kankula continued her meditation on Lord Shiva. When the stipulated period was over, Kankula in her practice of the threefold devotion cast off her body without any difficulty. The divine aerial chariot, shining in brilliant colors, sent by Tripurari, Shiva himself, accompanied by his attendants, arrived there quickly. With her dirt and sin removed, she mounted the aerial chariot and was immediately taken to Shiva's city by the Lord's noble attendants. She assumed a divine form. Her limbs were divine in their features. She assumed the form of Gauri, with the crescent moon as her coronet and divine ornaments shining brilliantly. She saw the three-eyed Mahadeva, the eternal being served devotedly by Vishnu, Brahma, and other gods. He had the brilliance of 10 million suns and was reverently served by Ganesha, Brinchi, Nandisha, Virabhadresvara, and others. His neck had a blue hue. He had 5 faces, 3 eyes, the crescent moon as a crest ornament, and his left side was a portion to Gauri, who had the brilliance of lightning. He was white in complexion like camphor, and wore all ornaments, besmeared with white ashes all over his body, and clad in white cloth, he shone brilliantly. The woman, Kankula, became highly delighted on seeing Shankara. In her flutter of delight, she bowed again and again to him. She joined her palms in reverence with great pleasure, love, and humility. In her great delight, she shed tears of joy and had feelings of horripilation. With sympathy, she was allowed to approach Parvati and Shankara, who gracefully looked at her. Kankula, the beloved wife of Benduga, thus attained a divine form and was blessed with divine pleasures and made a chaperone of Parvati. In the permanent abode of excellent bliss and sublime luster, she acquired a permanent residence and unobstructed pleasure. Shiva Purana, Chapter 5, Benduga's Salvation. Sanaka said, O Sutta, the fortunate Sutta, Thou art blessed with thy mind engrossed in Shiva. The story thou art hast narrated to us is wonderful and conductive to the increase of devotion. What did the woman Kankula do after obtaining her salvation? O intelligent one, please tell me in detail the story of her husband too. Sutta said, once she approached the goddess Uma Parvati. She bowed and offered prayers to her with palms joined in her flutter of delight. Kankula said, O mother of Skanda, daughter of the mountains, thou art always served by men. O beloved of Shiva, the bestower of all pleasures, having the form of the supreme Brahman. Thou art worthy of being served by Vishnu, Brahma, and others. Thou art both endowed with and devoid of attributes. Thou art the subtle primordial Prakriti, with existence, knowledge, and bliss for thy forms. Thou createst, maintainest, and annihilatest. Thou hast the three gunas. Thou art the refuge of the three types of divine beings. Thou sustainest Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesha. Sutta said, offering thus her prayers to the goddess, Kankula, who had attained salvation, ceased to talk with shoulders stooping and eyes brimming with tears of love. Parvati, the beloved of Shiva, ever favoring her devotees, was greatly moved by pity, and said to Kankula lovingly, Parvati said, O Kankula, my friend, I am pleased to hear your prayer. O beautiful woman, what is the boon you crave from me? Tell me, there is nothing that I cannot give you. Sutta said, thus urged by Girija, Kankula bowed to her. She asked her, bending her head and joining her palms together with great devotion. Kankula said, O celestial Girija, I do not know where my husband is at present, nor where he is to go. O benignant favorite of the distressed, please make such arrangements as would enable me to join him. O great goddess, Mahashani, my husband had a Sudra woman as his concubine. He died before me. I do not know what befell that sinner. Sutta said. On hearing these words of Kankula, Parvati, the daughter of Himalaya, who was fond of justice, replied lovingly. Girija said, O daughter, your wicked sinful husband Benduga, the foolish wretch enamored of prostitutes, has been to hell after his death. He underwent the various tortures of hell for many years and has now become a Pisaka, due to the residue of sins in the Vindhya mountains. Even now that wicked fellow is undergoing various painful tortures. He is in the form of a Pisaka, has only wind for his diet, and is suffering from all sorts of miseries. Sutta said. On hearing these words of Gauri, Kankula of auspicious rites was overwhelmed by the pain at the news of her husband's distress. She somehow steadied her mind, bowed to Maheshvari, and with a worried heart asked the goddess. Kankula said, O Maheshvari, O great goddess, be kind to me. Please redeem my husband, a wicked perpetrator of evil actions though he be. What is the means by which my husband, the sinful wretch of crooked intellect, can attain salvation? O goddess, obeisance to thee, please explain to me. Sutta said. On hearing these words of the woman, Parvati, favorably disposed to her devotees, replied to her chaperone Kankula, delighted in her heart. Parvati said, "If your husband were to hear the holy story of Shiva, he shall surmount the misery entirely and attain salvation." On hearing these words of Gauri, little short of nectar, she bent her shoulders, joined her palms, and bowed repeatedly with great devotion. She requested the goddess to provide an opportunity for her husband to hear the story for quelling his sins and gaining redemption. Suta said, "Gauri, the beloved of Shiva, on being frequently requested by the woman, took pity on her, making it clear thereby that she was favorably disposed to her devotees. Lovingly, she sent for the Gandharva king Tumburu, who used to sing songs of praise to Shiva. The daughter of Himalaya said thus to him. Girija said, "O Tumburu, the favorite of Shiva, ever ready to do as I wish, blessedness be thine. Accompany this lady immediately to Vindhya mountain. There's an awfully terrible Pisaka there. I shall tell you all his antecedents. You will be interested to know the same. This Pisaka had been a Brahmin in his previous birth. Then he was the husband of this woman, who is my chaperone now. He was very wicked and had a Sudra concubine. He was impure, never caring for the daily performance of ablutions and sandhya prayers. His mind was ever vitiated by anger. He ate all sorts of foul things. He quarreled with good men, and whatever he undertook, he had been bad. He was violent in his ways, bearing weapons and oppressing poor people cruelly. He used to take food with his left hand. He used to commit arson in other people's house. He was friendly with Kandalas. Every day he took delight in the company of prostitutes, forsaking his own wife. The roguish sinner took delight in associating with the wicked. In evil association with harlots, he destroyed all his merits. Besides, coveting more and more wealth, he made his own wife a fearless sharer of her paramour's beds. His evil ways continued till the last moments of his life, and when he died he went to Yama City, the terrible place where sinners reap the fruits of their misdeeds. After undergoing the tortures of many hells, the wicked wretch is now roaming in the Vindhya mountain as a roguish, sinful Pisaka. Narrate the holy sanctifying tale of sacred Siva Purana that quells all sins in front of him. Immediately after hearing the great story of Siva Purana, his soul will be cleared of sins and he will cast off his ghosthood. I order you to set that Benduga free from the miserable plight of Pisaka and bring him in the aerial chariot in the presence of Lord Shiva." Suta said, commanded thus by Parvati, Tumburu, the lord of Gandharvas, was much delighted and thought within himself how fortunate he was. Tumburu, the comrade of Narada, went to Vindhya mountain seated in the aerial chariot in the company of Kankula, the sinless woman, and saw the Pisaka laughing, crying, and loudly shouting by turns. His body was very huge. His jaws were immensely large, and his form was very crooked. The powerful Tumburu, the singer of the excellent songs of praise of Shiva, forcefully caught hold of the terrible Pisaka by means of nooses. Thereafter, for the sake of the discourse on Shiva Purana, Tumburu made elaborate festive arrangements. There was much talk and discussion among the people of all the worlds. O Tumburu has gone to the Vindhya mountain at the suggestion of the goddess to narrate the story of Shiva Purana to redeem the Pisaka. The divine sages too hastened to the place for listening to the same. The wonderful congregation of those who assembled there, reverently eager to listen to Shiva Purana, was very auspicious. They bound the Pisaka with nooses and compelled him to sit there. With the lute in his hand, Tumburu began to sing the story of Gauri's consort. Starting with the first Samhita compendium and ending with the seventh one, he clearly expounded the whole Shiva Purana along with its Mahatmya. On hearing the Shiva Purana, consisting of 7 compendiums, with great reverence, all the listeners deemed themselves highly blessed. The Pisaka too, on hearing the holy Shiva Purana, cast off all his sins and discarded his ghostly body. He assumed the divine form of the 3-eyed moon-crested god Shiva, white in complexion, clad in white cloth with the body illuminated and embellished by all ornaments. Taking up the divine body, the glorious Binduga, accompanied by his wife, sang the story of Parvati's consort. On seeing his wife thus, all the divine sages had a welcome surprise and were highly delighted in their minds. Gratified on hearing the wonderful story of Shiva, they returned to their respective abodes, delightedly glorifying Shiva. Binduga, in his divine form, ascended the aerial chariot with great pleasure. High up in the sky, with his wife at his side, he shone brilliantly. Singing the pleasing attributes of Shiva, he hastened to Shiva's region, accompanied by Tumburu and his own wife. Binduga was welcomed by Shiva and Parvati, and was lovingly made their attendant. His wife became the chaperone of Girija. In that permanent abode of excellent bliss and sublime luster, he acquired an unassailable residence and unobstructed pleasure. Thus I have narrated this holy anecdote that removes sins. It is highly delightful to Shiva and Parvati in pure and heightening devotion. He who listens to this account with devotion and recites this piously shall enjoy immense pleasures and obtain liberation. Shiva Purana, Chapter 6. Rules for listening to Shiva Purana. Sanaka said, O Sutta, O highly intelligent disciple of Vyasa, obeisance to thee. Thou art blessed and the foremost amongst Shiva's devotees. Thy attributes are highly praiseworthy. Please tell me about the rules for listening to Shiva Purana, whereby the listener shall obtain all excellent fruits. Sutta said, O sage Sanaka, I shall tell you the rules for listening to Shiva Purana, so that the entire fruit may be derived by their observance. The householder must invite an astrologer and propitiate him to fix an auspicious day for the beginning, so that it may conclude without obstacles in the middle. News must be circulated in different localities that the auspicious discourse is to take place, and all who seek welfare must be present. Women, Sudra, and others who are far removed from holy discourses, and stay away from singing glories of Shiva shall attend this discourse, whence they may have some enlightenment. Wherever there are devotees of Shiva, eager to listen to the songs of praise in the neighborhood, they must also be invited with due reverence. Thus there shall be a great festive gathering of saintly men at the discourse of Shiva Purana. A wonderful congregation, with devotion may all of you be pleased to join us for imbibing the sweet juice of Shiva Purana with due reverence. If you do not have sufficient leisure, please grace the assembly at least for a day. By all means do come, even for a short stay or a while. Thus all should be invited humbly. Those who should come be hospitably received in all respects. An excellent spot for the discourse of Shiva Purana must be selected in a temple of Shiva, or in a holy center, or in a park, or in a private house. The ground must be scrubbed, cleaned, and smeared with cow dung. It must be decorated with metallic materials, attended with all festivities. The whole arrangements must be divinely exquisite and pleasing to diverse tastes. All the rubbish must be removed, and all unnecessary things must be hidden in a corner away from the public view. A high platform must be constructed, richly decorated with stumps of plantain trees. The whole place should be covered with a canopy. Fruits and flowers should be profusely used. Flags and banners should be hoisted in the four quarters. They should be neatly arranged to be pleasing to everyone. A seat must be assigned to Shiva, the Supreme Soul. A comfortable seat shall be assigned to the orator. Good places shall be reserved for the regular listeners, as befitting their position. O sage, for the other casual visitors, seats with ordinary comfort shall be set apart. People must be in a pleasant mood, as on marriage occasions. All worldly worries and anxieties must be avoided. The discourser faces the north, and the listeners the east. There is no fear of the crisscrossing of the feet. Or the discourser faces the east as the worshipper. Or let the discourser and the recipient face each other. As long as he is seated in the seat of the discourser, the Puranist does not bow to anyone before the conclusion of the discourse. Whether he is a boy or a youth, an old man, an indigent person, or a weakling, the scholar well versed in the Purana is worthy of honor for all those who seek merit. Never shall anyone show deeming disrespect towards a Purana scholar. The speech from whose mouth is no less than the divine cow, Kamadenu, for all persons, either at the cause of birth or of attributes. There are many who may be termed guru, elder preceptor. Among them, the Puranic scholar is the greatest guru. Who can be a greater guru than the person who bestows the highest salvation on those who are disheartened due to the millions of births? The person who undertakes to conduct a discourse on this sanctifying tale shall be well versed in Puranas, pure, skillful, quiet, free from malice, saintly, sympathetic, and eloquent. The intelligent discourser shall start the narration of the story of Shiva Purana at sunrise and continue it for 2.5 praharas, or 7.5 hours earnestly. This story shall not be narrated before rogues, wicked persons of crooked professions, and those bent on conquering others in disputes and arguments. The discourse on this holy story shall not be conducted in a place infested by wicked men, or surrounded by thieves, or in the house of a rogue. The orator shall have an interval of muhurta 48 minutes at midday for the sake of answering calls of nature. The discourser must have his share on the day previous to the discourse so that his vow be maintained. During the days of discourse he shall perform all his daily routine, sandhya, etc., briefly. Another scholar equally well versed in Puranas should be sitting near the discourser to help him. He must be competent to clear doubts and eager to enlighten the people. In order to ward off obstacles to the discourse, Gananatha should be worshipped. The Lord of the story of Shiva and the book Shiva Purana too must be worshipped with piety. The story of Shiva Purana must be listened to with careful attention. The recipient must be intelligent, pure in mind, delighted at the heart, and a follower of conventions. If either the discourser or the recipient indulges in too many extraneous activities, is a victim of any of the 6 base feelings of lust, anger, etc., is enamored of women, or is a heretic, he cannot gain any merit. Casting off the worries of worldly affairs and those of wealth, house, and sons, if any one of pure mind concentrates his attention on the discourse, he will secure the excellent fruit. The recipients who are endowed with faith and piety do not eagerly pursue other activities, and are unruffled, pure, and restrained in speech, derive great merit. Base men of impious nature who listen to this holy story do not have any special merit derived out of it. They will have misery in every birth. Those who do not honor this Purana with presents according to their capacity are fools. Even if they listen to the story, they will not be sanctified. They will become indigent. Those who walk out of congregation in the middle of the discourse will have the adverse effect. They will face the destruction of their wives and wealth in the midst of enjoyment. The sons and descendants of the people who attend the discourse with turbaned head become sinners, defiling the whole race. The attendants of Yama and Hell force the people who chewed betel leaves while attending the discourse to eat their own feces. Those who listen to the story seated on a more elevated seat fall into hell, and after undergoing the tortures there, are reborn as crows. Those who listen to this auspicious story, seated in Vira pose, fall into hell, and after undergoing the tortures of hell, are reborn as poisonous plants. Those who listen to the story without bowing to the discourser at first fall into hell, and after undergoing the tortures of hell are reborn as Arjuna trees. Those who, not being sick, listen to the story lying down fall into hell and are reborn as pythons. those who listen to the story seated on the same level as the discourser become as sinful as the defiler of the preceptor's bed and fall into hell. Those who speak ill of the discourser or of this sacred story are born as dogs and lead miserable lives in 100 births. Those who begin to argue and dispute while the discourse is being held fall into hell, and after undergoing the tortures there are reborn as donkeys. Those who never listen to this sanctifying story fall into hell. After experiencing the tortures there, they are reborn as wild boars. The rogues who create hindrances even as the discourse is being held fall into hell. After undergoing the tortures there for millions of years, they are born as village boars. Realizing all these, the listener shall always be pure, devoted to the discourser, and intelligent enough to listen to the story with devotion. For warding off obstacles to the discourse, Lord Ganesha should be worshipped at first. Every day at the end of the discourse, he shall briefly perform expiatory rites for omissions and commissions. He shall worship the 9 planets and the deities in the Sarvatobhadra array. He shall worship the book according to the rites of Shiva's adoration. At the conclusion of the worship, he shall offer prayer to the book, identified directly with Shiva, humbly and piously joining his palms in reverence. The prayer: Thou art the visible Mahashvara Srimat Shiva Purana. Thou hast been accepted by me for listening purpose. Be thou pleased with me. This wish of mine must be fulfilled by thee. May this narration of the story be concluded without obstacles. I am immersed in the middle of the ocean of worldly existence. Please lift me up from it. Miserable wretch that I am, with my limbs caught in the crocodiles of Karman. O Shankara, I am thy slave. The householder shall thus pray to Shiva Purana, identified directly with Shiva, in words evoking pity. Then he shall begin the worship of the discourser. He shall adore the discourser too in the same manner as in the rite of the worship of Shiva, and propitiate him with flowers, cloths, ornaments, incense lamps, etc. In the presence of the discourser, he shall take a vow and observe all restraints with a pure mind, and the same shall be maintained till the conclusion, to the extent of his capacity. O thou, the foremost of discoursers, identified with Vyasa, well versed in the sacred literature of Shiva, please remove my ignorance through the light of this story. He shall invite 5 Brahmins if he can, or at least a Brahmin for repeating Shiva Pankarna mantra. Thus, O sage, I have told you the rules of listening to the story with devotion, as well as those of governing the pious recipients. What else do you wish to hear? Chapter 7. The Glory of the Shiva Purana. The description of do's and don'ts to those who take up listening to the Shiva Purana as a rite, and that of the worship of the discourser. Sanaka said, O Sutta, Sutta of great intellect, thou art foremost amongst devotees of Shiva, and the most blessed. Thou hast narrated this wonderfully auspicious story, O sage, please tell me the rules of governing those who perform the rite of listening to Shiva Purana for the benefit of the whole world. Sutta said, O Sanaka, listen with devotion to the rules governing those persons. If you hear the excellent story with due observance of the rules, the fruit is excellent and there is no obstacle in the achievement of the fruit. Persons devoid of initiation are not entitled to listen to the story. Hence, those who wish to listen must take initiation, O sage, from the discourser. The devotee who takes up this rite shall take his daily meal only at the end of the daily discourse. He must observe brahmacharya, celibacy, during those days. He must lie on the ground and take food only in the patravali, a number of leaves stitched together to serve the purpose of a plate. The man who has the strength in abundance shall observe fast till the conclusion of the whole Purana, and listen to the excellent Shiva Purana with great devotion and purity. He may drink only milk or ghee throughout, and listen to the story with pleasure. He may live on fruit diet or take a single meal, or even eschew that, and proceed with the listening rite. Or he may take havishyana, cooked rice, soaked in ghee and sacrificially offered, once a day, and maintain the rite. The diet part is according to convenience and comfort, but the listening shall be strictly maintained. If there is more facility in hearing, let the devotee take food. If observing fast causes hindrance to listening to the story, it is not to be recommended. The householder taking the rite shall avoid heavy indigestible pulses like nispava, masarika, etc., stale food, defiled food, brinjals, gourds, radish, pumpkins, cocoa nuts, garlic, onion, asafoetida, intoxicating beverages, and all kinds of meat. He shall avoid the 6 base feelings of lust, anger, etc. He shall not despise Brahmins, and bear ill will towards chaste ladies and good men. He shall not look at women in their menstrual period. He shall not converse with fallen people, nor talk to haters of Brahmins or unbelievers in the Vedas. The householder shall practice and strictly adhere to truthfulness, purity, mercy, restraint in speech, straightforwardness, humility, liberal-mindedness, and other virtues. The householder may listen to the story with any specific desire cherished in his mind, or absolutely free from any desire. If he has any desire, it will be fulfilled. If he is free from desire, he shall attain salvation. An indigent person, a consumptive, a sinner, an unfortunate person, and a person having no child shall hear this excellent story. The 7 types of wicked women, like Kaka Vandaya, a woman having a single child, or those suffering from miscarriages, shall hear this story. Whether women or men, all must hear the story of Shiva Purana, O sage, in the manner prescribed. The days of discourse on Shiva Purana must be considered very excellent, even on a par with millions of sacrifices. Gifts duly bestowed on these excellent days, even though they may not be much in quantity, yield everlasting benefit. Observing the rites thus, And listening to the great story, the flourishing householder shall delightedly perform the Udyapana rite at the end of completion. This Udyapana rite is on par with the Katardasi rite, observed on the 14th day of the lunar month. Rich men who wish to secure the fruits thereof must perform it likewise. Indigent devotees usually do not and need not perform the Udayapana rite. They are sanctified by the listening alone. Pious devotees of Shiva are free from desires. After the festive celebration of the sacrifice of the discourse on Shiva Purana is thus concluded, the listeners shall perform the worship. O sage, due worship must be performed in front of the book in the manner of the worship of Shiva. A fine new cloth to cover the book, and a strong silken cord to tie it up must be given. Those who give silken cord and new cloth for the book of Purana become yogins endowed with knowledge in every birth that they take. Many kinds of valuable objects, cloth, ornaments, vessels, and much wealth in particular should be given to the discourser. Those who give carpets, deerskins, cloth, elevated couches, and planks to keep the volume of Purana on, attain heaven, enjoy all desirable pleasures, stay in Brahma's region for the duration of a kalpa, and finally attain Shiva's region. After performing the worship of the book, as stipulated, O foremost among sages, and also that of the discourser with great eclat, the scholar who had been appointed assistant should be duly honored in the same manner, but with a smaller sum of money. Food and monetary gifts and other things must be given to the Brahmin visitors. A great festival must be celebrated with vocal and instrumental music and performance of dances. The listener shall gradually become detached, and especially on the next day, O sage, the Holy Gita, narrated by Shiva to Ramakandra, must be read. If the listener is a householder, he must perform homa with pure havis, holy ghee, for tranquilizing the rite. The homa must be performed with Rudra Samhita or with each verse of Gayatri, for in fact this Purana is identical with it, or with the Mula Mantra of Shiva of 5 syllables. If he is incompetent to perform homa, let him give the ghee offering to a Brahmin. In order to suppress the defects of deficiency and excess, he shall either read or listen with devotion to the 1,000 names of Shiva. Undoubtedly, thus everything shall be fruitful, and the fruit too shall be excellent, since there is no greater thing in the 3 worlds than this. He shall feed 11 Brahmins with honey and milk puddings. He must give them dakshina, also to complete the rite. If he is competent, O sage, he must make an image of a lion with 3 palas of gold, and either engrave the name of this Purana on it, or affix a label with the name written on it. He must worship his preceptor of great restraint with the gifts of cloth, ornaments, scents, etc., and hand them over to him for propitiating Shiva. O Sanaka, by the power of this gift and of the Purana he shall secure the blessings of Shiva and be freed from bondage of worldly existence. If these rites are performed, the Shiva Purana shall yield entire fruit, enjoyment of worldly pleasures, and salvation. Thus I have narrated to you the greatness of the Shiva Purana. that bestows every cherished desire. What else do you wish to hear? The Shiva Purana holds the mark of distinction amongst all Puranas. It is highly pleasing to Shiva. It wards off the ailment of worldly existence. Those who are always engaged in the meditation of Shiva, those whose tongues adore the attributes of Shiva, and those whose ears listen to the story of Shiva, cross the ocean of worldly existence. I seek refuge in Shiva, the great, of infinite bliss, Shiva whose form is unaffected by all of the three ganas, Shiva who manifests himself within and without this world, within and without the mind, Shiva whose form is variously evolved by mental ideas and verbal expressions.